Welcome to the African American Museum and Library. Today is a beautiful Saturday. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Beth Silva, and I am the Museum Project Coordinator for the African American Museum and Library. And today is real special because I have my friend and colleague here, and we're going to talk a little bit about the institution before we go into our very special guests. And we're really honored today to have two special guests in this house. But before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about the institution. The African American Museum and Library is a research institution for African American history and culture. We have 4 departments here now. A non-circulating library, which has over 16,000 books on African American history and culture, which does not include a rare book collection. The oldest book is 1815. And actually, it's not really a book, it's a journal of a Navy captain and who is not African American. However, he talks about an African American who is, he calls the cook. So the rare book collection here is not actually on display in the reference library. We have it in a temperature control environment. As you know, because it is quite old, we have to maintain that temperature to preserve it. So the non-circulating library, of course, we're open every day except for Sundays. We are closed. The next department is our archives department. The archives department has close to about 200 collections now, such as Ron Dellum's when he was in Congress for 23 years, Congresswoman Barbara Lee's collection. We share her collection with Mills College, and that's because she's a graduate from Mills College. So we thought it would be proper to just share that, her collection with the college. We also have the first African American school teacher, Miss Ida Jackson, that is in the Oakland Unified School District. We have also Henry Delton Williams, who came here when he was 5 years old. He is now the legendary Motown designer who created designs such as for Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, and actually Martha Reeves was at AAMLO several times and performed. I don't know if any of you were here for that, but it was pretty amazing. You're talking about dancing in the street, was dancing at AAMLO, and people were all over the place. And he also designed for our very own Minnie Williams. We have his jumpsuit in our archives here. We have also Linnell, the comedian. We have her original designs in here, and you're not going to be able to see it unless you call up, because we'll bring it out of a temperature controlled environment. But the dress itself, Martha Reeves' dress and Linnell's dress, are actually hand beaded with sequences and beads. So there are original designs. Minnie Williams' jumpsuit is made out of, it's bell bottoms, made out of spandex, and it's about this big. And so when he donated it to us, we had a wonderful event here. He walked in. I had a hard time finding a mannequin that was small enough to fit that jumpsuit, but I did. And so he walked in, and he was on the other side of the gallery, and he yelled. He said, "Vina, I was never that small." I said, "This is it." So we had the designer here as well. So it was a great day. And we're talking about Slim Jenkins, 7th Street. So you have a lot of wonderful collections here, and they have been digitalized. Most of them have, so you can even go online and check it out. If you want to view them in person, make an appointment, because it is by appointment only. We'll pull that collection and let you kind of dive through it at your own leisure. Now, Seed Lending Library, it's the newest department here. Have you seen our Seed Lending Library interview? All right, you need to check it out. It has its own department now. We started in a card catalog. Now it has its own department. And the seeds are free to the community. We're hoping you take them home, grow them in small containers or large gardens, and then bring some seeds back. Seed Lending Library. Now, the next, where you are here, this department. Sometimes we host traveling exhibition, but moreover, we do our own exhibition from our archives. Our Bay Area artists or some from out of state or out of country, just depends. Now, featured here on my right and my left, this is the East Wing and the West Wing. This is called Visions Toward Tomorrow, which is actually the history of Oakland, beginning with the 1800s. You have kiosks on my left and right, and you actually key into that, and you can hear individuals speak on their experiences in this beautiful city of Oakland and the Bay Area. So that gives you a little overview of what we're all about. As you walked in, I'm sure you saw Black Culture, the Art of Photography in Miniature Galleries. That is exhibition that just finished about 2 weeks ago. And Tammy Knight is a Bay Area artist, so when you get time, check it out. Everything in those miniature galleries that she designed, I only took her creations and created my vision, she let me do it, of how her exhibition should look. So check it out. Everything handmade in her miniature galleries, and she is pretty amazing. So a little overview about AAMLO. So now, with two very special guests here, you know, I want to just say this before I hand this over to my library assistant, Dorothy. It's coming home time for you, and it's so good to have you back here, even as an author. It's fantastic to see you in the house. And I also know that Dorothy used a lot of our archives too, so that makes us really feel proud. And also, she brings with her a special guest, Ms. Judy. And so, Marco, where are you? I want to bring Marco up. He's going to tell you a little bit more about these dynamic, wonderful ladies. Okay? Are there any questions for me regarding the institution? Okay, so that means I did a pretty good job then with that overview. Thank you so much, Marco.
All right, everyone, welcome again to today's event. So today we have Dorothy Lazard. Dorothy retired from Oakland Library in 2021 after 20 years of service. During her last 12 years, she worked as the head librarian of the Oakland History Center, which garnered her widespread attention for many local, historic, accessible, interesting, and representative. Besides her library career, Dorothy has been a committed writer since childhood. She holds a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Nonfiction from Goucher College in Baltimore. She won the Association of Writers and Writing Programs Intro Journal Award while she was a student there. Her writings have appeared in the anthologies Oakland Noir, Go Girl, The Black Woman's Book of Travel and Adventure, and The Public Library, A Photographer's Journey, in Essence Magazine, and several other publications. Her newly published memoir, What You Don't Know Will Make a Whole New World, has been called compelling and memorable. This is her first book. So to facilitate today's event, we have Judy Juanita. So she is an American poet, novelist, and playwright who is a lecturer in college writing programs at the University of California, Berkeley. She was formerly a writing teacher at Laney College. In 1968, while attending San Francisco State, Juanita served as editor-in-chief of the Black Panther, the newspaper of the Black Panther Party. In her semi-autobiographical novel, Virgin Soul, a black teenager starts community college in Oakland, struggles to matriculate, and then joins the Black Panther Party. The story of the female foot soldier in the Black Power movement, Virgin Soul, exposes the unheralded women working behind the scenes in the Black Panther Party and the Black student movement. So I hope you enjoy today's program, and here are our two guests.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming out. Good to see everyone. I am so happy to be able to be a part of this debut, this memoir from Dorothy. I just want to say that before I talk about the book a little bit, that Dorothy has been an Oakland treasure for a very long time. We can't say enough for what she's done for Oakland and the Oakland Public Library and all of us who treasure not only books, but the Oakland story. She's guarded it. So this book contributes to that. It's amazing, you know? So let's get right into Dorothy being able to discuss her book. And I read it. I can tell you that it's a page turner. It's very emotional. Not only because I have many connections with Dorothy through the book, I also grew up in East Oakland, but because her story is heart-wrenching at every turn. But it's not bitter. It's not harsh, even though the kinds of experiences she went through would have made somebody else and perhaps have made other people bitter and harsh, and even the kind of experiences which would make young people contemplate ending their life. Because we know that's a high concern in our society right now, young people committing suicide. This is not what happens in this book, of course. Yes. But the harshness doesn't keep you turning the page. It's the laughter, the joy, and also continuous discovery. So I'm interested to know from Dorothy, how did you figure out where to start this story? A memoir always has to start somewhere, but this could have started a number of places. Why did you choose where you started it? And could you talk about the beginnings of the book?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those kind words, too. Well, welcome everybody to AAMLO. I started the book where I started it. Do you want to know why I chose to write the book, or do you want to know why I started it? Okay, have at it. Okay. Well, I wanted to commemorate in some way my 50th year in California. I come out here as an almost 9-year-old, and I thought for sure that we'd be here for a few years, and all of a sudden it's 50 years later. So in 2017, I started to think about that upcoming anniversary. And it was like, well, should I give myself a party? But then a party's only gonna last for a few hours, and maybe you'll have a hangover, but then it'll be over. And it seems 50 years deserves a lot more than just, finger food and wine. And so I started to write down some of my memories of early childhood. I was also at the same time trying to process or understand, how did I become who I became? When you get a certain age or for some of us in the audience who are a certain age. You get a certain age and you start looking back on your life and you start to, basically take measure of how you've lived, who you've influenced, who influenced you, what carved, the influences that carved your personality. I certainly was doing that. Hopefully I've been doing it all along, but I was especially doing it in, 2017, 2018 as this anniversary was approaching. And so I had started writing different essays, personal essays about my life, even when I was a student back at Goucher College back in the late 90s. And, when I write another essay every now and then I write another one, and I'm a just complete habitual note taker, so I would write notes down and statistics, and, I'm constantly reading nonfiction, and I like to read books about the Bay Area. But my story wasn't in those books. Did anybody ever read the book Season of the Witch? Which is fantastic. And it got close to what I had experienced as a kid growing up here. But it still wasn't my story. So that certainly spurred me on. And so I started writing it, and I got to about 130 pages when I met my publisher, Steve Wasserman, to talk about a completely different book. And at the end of that meeting, to talk about a completely different book that he was interested to see if I would be interested in writing, I read him a few pages of this book, and he's like, "Oh, do you have a publisher for that?" And so that was my moment of serendipity, which was incredible and unbelievable, and it's still hard for me to even tell that story and believe it myself. But that's how the book kind of started and came to be.
So, I want to know why you started this book at the point that you started. Okay?
Sorry. It's kind of like when I was in school, teachers like, "This is all good, but that was not the question." You brought me right back to high school. I started it there because that's one of the strongest memories I hold.
So she starts it in 1968 when she and her family arrived in California.
Right. And we're talking, I'm still not answering your question, obviously. Okay, so for context, I'm starting it when my family comes to California. And I started with a scene that for me kind of marked the wonder that California introduced me to. Just to get to California, I had to travel. My family and I traveled through a lot of landscapes and familial readjustments that I hadn't expected. And so for me, it was the perfect place to start it, because that's where I think I started becoming, on some cellular level, a Westerner.
So that's wonderful.
She's
Right.
She's an English teacher, so I'm pushing you towards something.
That's right.
Well, Floyd Salas, many of you know him. He, he's a great writer, Buffalo Nickel, so forth, and he's deceased now. But Floyd used to always say, "Start with the suffering, start with the suffering." So the suffering doesn't come for a bit. And the suffering here, basically beginning your life, the life of the child in an orphanage, is a striking and tragic story in the book. But you didn't start with that. That's a very interesting choice for me, that you didn't start with
Because I don't see my life as tragic. And I don't see that orphanage as tragic. It was challenging, to be the first black girl in an all-white German Catholic orphanage. Yeah, it was challenging. It was challenging to be away from my parents. It was challenging to live this kind of regimented life when I hadn't been living a regimented life with my parents. But now, I have to say, Judy, I did think of starting the book there, but I didn't want to start the book there because that was less important to me than the journey with my family out to California. So I feel like the first impression a person gets when they open up a book, a lot of people just read books, first 30 pages. If it doesn't grab you, you're just putting it down and turn on YouTube or something. I know this because I've been a librarian I've heard stories. And so I wanted to certainly share that story because that also marked my personality, but I didn't want to start there because that 7-year-old in an orphanage is not who, ended up conquering the world like I have. No, I'm joking.
Good. Just as a writer also, I think that the choice of the landscape of California prevails throughout the book, and that this book is about California, and it doesn't focus on St. Louis at all. So can you talk about
Which is why I probably won't get invited to Left Bank Books.
Yeah, no, it's not a St. Louis book, it's a California story. What is the arc of the story so people can know what to expect?
I think that's an interesting question. Why would people want to open up a book and already know the arc?
It's like a movie trailer. You still want a sneak peek. You want to know what you're getting into.
Any spoilers, but
Oh, okay. The arc is a migration story, and it's a migration story in big and small ways. But also, I'm going to try to answer your question. I know I want to. It's a migration story, so it begins with a migration with family members, and it ends with a migration of family members.
I think that
Did that cover it without giving it away?
I'll go to the next question.
Then there's an explosion, there's a car chase.
Believe it or not, we've discussed these questions in advance, but you keep surprising me with an answer. How did you decide when to stop writing this story? This is very interesting where it ends. And of course, you don't have to give away the end, but kind of talk about just the general ending or arc.
I decided to stop it where it was because in my mind, looking back at my life, I feel like that felt very much like a chapter closing, like a big developmental chapter closing. So I thought end it there. Yeah. Is that the best I can answer that question? Yes.
Well, we're not giving a lot away because you're here, you survived.
Yeah, I understand.
So,
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
So can you hear me back at that table back there?
Better with
Okay,
the mic.
good.
Yeah, it's better with the mic.
Better with the mic? Okay, because we're back and forth.
Let's sit closer. Yes,
Yeah, I just felt like it was those first 10 years in California That's the recipe that makes who you see now. That was the mixture, the influences, the experiences that made me who I am now. You know, the way I see the world, the way I vote, what I like as far as entertainment, you know, how I'm gonna love people, who I love, all of that got set, gelled, in those first 10 years. And it felt right to stop where I stopped. And beyond that, it feels like a very different chapter and not as interesting.
Okay, so that leads us, I'm wondering if this then is a coming of age story?
Yes.
More than a writer's experience, because throughout the book, I think it's extremely interesting that Dorothy has a capacity to write narrative stories very short. They're not long. They're not, they don't go on for pages and pages and pages. But she ends often with great insights about how she developed as a writer, you know, and as a reader. So is it more of a coming of age, or is it a writer's experience? What is this book?
I think it's both. I think people who write often are learning how to write as children, as they develop. Because they're looking for a voice. They're looking for some agency. They're looking for, I'm speaking for all writers right now. They're looking for some way to create a place in the world for themselves. And if they're charitable, they are also looking to give voice to other people in their situation, if they believe those people exist. I've had some recent conversations with people who confessed to me, or shared with me, not confessed, but shared with me that they thought growing up that they were the only ones who were going through their experience, versus, you know, the kids who know that, you know, there's a kid down the street going through my experiences too. But I don't know, I believe writers, you know, Amy Tan has this great saying, I don't know if she uses it habitually, but it was very profound when I heard her say that you don't really need trauma to become a writer, you just need perspective, you know.
The trauma house.
Trauma makes it interesting. Trauma adds drama for sure. And it's also traumatizing to write about trauma.
Yes, so speaking of trauma, okay, there are a number of themes in this book, and I'll just name some of them that I found. Maternal love, powerlessness and estrangement, schooling, education, and busing, libraries, the actual physical space of libraries, and libraries as a place of refuge, being securely housed or finding secure housing. She bumps around a lot here. Black culture and Black consciousness, the joy and humor of movies and music, work ethic, strong, seemingly invincible women. And there's also the theme of writing in cars, because that happens throughout the text. So can we just focus for a minute on these incredible women in this text, starting with the grandmother.
The grandmother. She is known in the book as Mamela. That's what we called her, Mama Ella. So it all got slurred into Mamela. And she was my mother's mother. And she was the one who came and got us out of the orphanage. She and her older son, my mother's younger brother, Uncle Shirley, and whose real name wasn't Shirley, that's all explained in the book. And she and I she was immediately a source of suspicion for me, because you know, most people just know their grandmother, they don't meet their grandmother. And I never got a sense from my mother, from watching my mother, that they were close. And when we were coming out to California, I didn't know what had caused the estrangement between them. And so I was always kind of, you know, it was always kind of like a barge pole relationship, me and her, because we, you know, just didn't click. And she was old school, I would say. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, not even old school, OG.
Yeah, OG, okay. So she was very
Everybody knows
religious.
OG, right?
They're from Oakland.
Some people might just say it, what it is. Just in case.
Okay. OG, do I know what OG means?
Original gangster.
Gangster, okay. Okay, I do know what it means.
Original
Okay.
gangster.
That's Mamela in the book.
Yeah, so she was take no prisoner. I was a kid who was challenging her, trying her nerves. What was the old saying? You're working my last nerve. So I was that kid in the family, and standing very willfully on the periphery of the family, which I still do actually. Is there anything else?
Keep talking, because I want you to read one of that section where Mamela just can't you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I have to find it. Maybe you can pages.
What?
When Mamela wonders what you're doing at that library.
Oh, okay. I love that casual. Okay.
So she comes to San Francisco first. The family goes and lives in San Francisco near the Haight, or in the Haight. Were you in the Haight? No, you were outside.
We were, when we first come to live in San Francisco, we're in the Haight-Ashbury. And then we moved to Pine Street, which used to be the Fillmore, but now it's Lower Pacific Heights. Are you talking about Western Addition?
Here it is. Here's the section. Anybody who has the book in it, it's on 72, 73.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and so many of the themes of the book are encompassed through Mamela. But definitely this theme of,
Do you want me to read this?
I think you should start right there and go right on up to read that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna do it over here.
Yes.
Is that better, to do it over here?
That's good.
Okay, I'll just go. This is the Western Addition chapter. Even more delicious was the fact that my grandmother didn't know about my library excursions. It was a part of my life she did not control. When the 3 o'clock bell rang and the children of St. Dominic's school scattered like buckshot through the neighborhood, I headed directly home to do chores. But the magic time after chores and before dinner was all mine. My grandmother hardly ever asked me where I was going, as long as I was back well before dark, as long as my chores were done. My mother, on the other hand, was eager for me to head outside. A trip out of the house meant that she'd be rewarded later with a story of what I saw or did. The sooner I got home from school and tended to any of my mother's needs, pills, sandwich, coffee, cigarette, TV, chat, the sooner I could leave. My grandmother, however, was suspicious of anything that set one apart from industry and family. That included what she called book learning. When I finally bolstered the nerve to present my grandmother with a library card application, she said, "How much does this cost?" "The library is free." "How much do the book cost if you lose them, if you lose one?" I couldn't say. I didn't think to ask, but I swore I wouldn't lose any. I told her I was really good at dates and that I'd make sure to return them on time. Still, she refused. Fortunately, whatever disappointment I felt about her refusal didn't last. I liked going to the library to do my reading anyway. It was quiet there, and no one expected anything of me but to read. Among the community of readers, I felt like a serious reader myself. It was during this honeymoon with the public library that I began to see how my life could be radically different from my mother's and grandmother's lives. It was a little bit frightening, but exciting too. I could be my own something if I only learned enough. I just needed to find out what there was to learn. Our family had no legacy of higher education or working professionals. We were a blue-collar family. I never got a sense that Medea liked school or had had much experience there. I passed by the schoolhouse door was all that she regularly said about her own education. I knew she hadn't finished high school, having married and started a family by 16, but her pride in my scholastic achievements was full body and accompanied by treats. My grandmother, on the other hand, felt something closer to tolerance than pride for my love of learning. Ella Baskin was a practical woman who had worked hard all her life. She had picked cotton in the South, worked as a maid, a nurse's aide, and several other things. Her sense of self was rooted in work and the ability to provide for her family. She had no time for book-spun dreams or remote possibilities. Books were, quote, for people with too much time on their hands, unquote. I heard her say more than a few times. Anybody worth their salt was working, not sitting around with a nose in a book. More? Okay. Give me a signal if you want me to stop. Knowing she felt this way, I was not about to share my budding desire to become a writer. How worthless would she think writers were if books were a waste of time? It seemed as though she may have looked at owning books and having time to read them as a luxury she could not afford to indulge in. Everything she needed to know, Mamela used to tell me, was in her Bible or learned through experience. Common sense versus book sense. Silently, I disagreed. Books had already taught me better than that, but I saw no reason to try to change her mind. One day, when I came home, bragging about the good grade I had received on some assignment, my grandmother said, "Boys won't like you if you're too smart," which left me wondering how smart was too smart. Maybe a book in the library could tell me. Absorbing words like dry soil in a rainstorm, I sensed that the more I learned, the more I was moving, slowly but surely, toward something fulfilling. I began to see ignorance as a kind of poverty. What might my mother's life be like if she was educated? For that matter, how might her children's lives or her mother's be different?
Some of you might know that when Martin Luther King was a young man and off to seminary, his father, who had been a circuit preacher, a traveling preacher in the South, which was a job for black males. It was a step up from sharecropping. His father wanted him to join that, and he told his father, "No, I'm not going to do that." And he had a clear idea of where he was going with his education. So it's kind of interesting. I thought about that when I read this part of the book, but as opposed to proclaiming what she was going to do, she had to proclaim it she had to claim it in an inner sense, because she was yet a child under this extremely strong woman's hand, and she couldn't defy her. So she had, this theme of secretly exploring or being clandestine. It goes throughout the whole book, really. Did you think about that? Because here you are writing it, and you're exposing you're exposing the ignorance, you know. See, we could look at something like this picture here, and this says Black people were glorious and we were united, and it's a wonderful, wonderful, iconic image. And, that's not what happens all the time throughout this book. You are exposing some of the problems that haunt us to this day, and one of them is with Mamela and Mamela's determination to keep you in your lane. So would you talk about that a little bit more, particularly when you go to work for Mamela at the home?
Well, Mamela ran a board and care home. We call them nursing homes, we call them board and care homes. It varied. And what Judy's referencing is that I would do chores around the house. We also did chores around that home, which was across the street from our house on Pine Street. And there is something clandestine about it, and there is something very revealing about me. Basically, I did feel like I was telling tales out of school. I did not have the relationship with my grandmother that my cousins had. I had many, many cousins. But I didn't have the same kind of relationship. I was kind of put to work. They were living with their parents in Oakland and other places. So, and they'd come over and visit, and they'd be loved up, and what are you doing, and you're so cute, and stuff like that. And that was not my relationship with her. Let me not lose my thought. When you're writing memoir, why set about writing it, I figure, if you're not going to tell the truth, if you're going to gloss over it, And so I opted to tell my truth. This is what I experienced. So, is it violation? Family violation? Not really, because it's my lived experience.
Would you feel comfortable with every member of your family reading this book?
Yeah, because it's my lived experience.
As we used to say, more power to you.
And I had a cousin who said, well, right on, you're writing a book, but if I don't like it, I'll just sue you. And it's like, do your best. What? But now she's kind of thrilled that she's mentioned in the book, so I'm not expecting a lawsuit. So I don't know. It's the book, I wanted to also show how vulnerable kids are, but also how strong kids are. Even if it's not a strength that can be exemplified in, acting out or talking back, because that wasn't going to happen. But although it did, to mixed results. But I also wanted to show how a kid could try to have some agency over his own life.
So let's then talk about your mother then, because that brings in all those themes. And I put it down as powerlessness, but I like what you said, vulnerability.
Sure.
But your mother is just key here in this book. I have to say, even thinking about it, I kind of tear up, but the mother is a poignant figure in this book.
To me, writing it was a balancing act. How much do I want to share about my mother? I felt it sometimes very stingy about what I did share. It's just like, do they need to know that? Do they need to know this? So there was a lot more weighing of what do you say about this woman that you adored and who adored you back, but who was vulnerable? And when a kid sees their parent in a vulnerable state, whether it be through illness, like my mother, she was grand mal epileptic, and that's, for those of you who aren't familiar with epilepsy, it's like the most severest kind. It's very violent. But that's what I knew. That's all I had known. She had been sick my entire life. And, but, you know, I loved her to pieces. She loved me to pieces. And her vulnerability plays a big factor in the book, because it played a big factor in our lives. And when a kid, the point I was going to make is, when a kid sees their parent vulnerable, they are led to wonder, what does that mean for me out in the world? How will I navigate the world? Who will be my victor? Who will be my savior? If this person who I think is, you know, all powerful, all wonderful, is vulnerable and cannot work and has no money and is a member of a faith that doesn't allow divorce, and, you know, we were Catholic, and she's married to a really old man who's old enough to be her father. So it definitely marked my attitude about family, about adult relationships, and my own fortunes out in the world. And I think that's why I was so contentious with my grandmother, but also so secretive with my grandmother, because it's just like, I gotta outlive you, lady. But I just want to say this in public. My mother was awesome. She loved Westerns, which I never understood, but I still love Westerns too. She loved Westerns and Lucy and baseball and Kurt Flood and coconut candy and yellow sundresses and high heels when she was stable enough to put them on. She was hard-headed. And so a lot of that I didn't put in the book, because when I was writing, it was hard to write about her. And it was hard to share her, you know. She's somebody who doesn't live in family lore. You know, there are generations of my family who were born after she lived, so. Anyway.
Very interesting. I think your mother's life presents you with many turning points in the book. So I'll just say that because you don't mind, those are spoilers to give away.
Right.
But
No spoilers. There's a car chase, there's a fire.
And that's just chapter 1.
That's just chapter 1.
Right. So,
There's an earthquake.
so in the book, how did you end up? You started in San Francisco. You know, I got a big voice. It started in San Francisco, then you ended up in Oakland.
Yeah.
Hey, how did that happen? Or
In life, in the book and life, we were living in San Francisco on Pine Street, and the decision was made to move over here. All my grandmother's kids had migrated from San Francisco to Oakland. My family came out here in 1962. My mother and her children, me and my brother, sister, we were living separate from them in St. Louis, and then, you know, as we said earlier, we came out here after the Baskin clan had come out here. So everybody kind of en masse moved to Oakland, and then eventually we moved to Oakland. What I didn't know and what I didn't add to the book is that we moved to Oakland so my grandmother could be closer to her children, or able-bodied children. Mamela, yeah. And I don't know if you want me to say more about what happens to her when we come over here. I won't say that. But anyway, I didn't know it then, but Mamela was really sick when we moved over here. And that was part of the reason we did move over to the East Bay, to be among the relatives, and which also changed my life.
Yes, yeah. So maybe you want to go back into, because this theme of things being clandestine goes throughout the book. And she does something that kids, I think, today can't do as much. Kids under their parents' supervision have all these soccer practices and all this stuff to go to and being picked up here and taken there. But this kid here, and this kid in the book, for my 2 cents, had a lot of freedom. It was stolen freedom, but she traveled on her own 2 feet all around San Francisco. You want to go into that? And then when she moved to Oakland, she did the same thing. So she was very acquainted with getting around, and getting to know these cities.
I love walking, and I love discovering things. I love architecture. I love memorizing the names of streets. I always have. I remember vividly which I didn't put in the book, my mother telling me how to read street addresses when I was a really little kid. She'd always say, we live on the 2600 block of Franklin. I was like, okay. How could you not wander around Haight-Ashbury in 1968? That's just a given. I thought maybe every kid had to do that. I certainly did. Because it opened up my mind. It literally, to use the vernacular of the time, blew my mind. I had not, I'd come from segregated St. Louis. I had not been around, lived around, or befriended people of different races. And so it was just a mind blow, to wander to Golden Gate Park, a few blocks away from our house, or Park Bowl. It was a bowling alley before it was a skating rink, before it became, Tower Records or whatever it became. Rasputin's or whatever it became. It was just a lot of fun. And then it was different over here when we moved to Oakland. The wandering was a little bit more, pulled in because we had all these relatives with cars and stuff. So the wandering that I did in Oakland happened later when we moved across the freeway here to Oak Village Apartments, just a few yards away from where we are now, and exploring downtown. Because Oak Village, this part of West Oakland that is on the other side of the freeway, felt very much like this netherworld. It wasn't quite West Oakland that I knew, but it also wasn't downtown either. And so I spent a lot of my teen years wandering around downtown, looking in shop windows, putting things on layaway, hanging out at DeLauer's bookstore, the public library, the main library where I had my public library career, hanging out at Holmes' bookstore, where he would just let you stay up on that mezzanine and wander through all those dusty old books, and he didn't care. The Roxy Theater.
Yeah, please talk about the theaters. Those of you, how many of you from Oakland remember the T&D? Anyone? Yeah. Oh, one hand goes up.
One hand?
We do
Oh
remember too.
gosh,
Oh,
But,
man. Vincent, you don't remember the T&D?
Yes, I do.
Oh,
okay.
I went to all of them.
He said he didn't want to betray his age. Yeah.
Can I read from
Yes.
the T&D? What's your privilege?
What is where?
Okay, it's over here.
But this is while you're finding it, she's talking about the era when she was a teenager and the black films were just coming out. It's a kind of a derogatory term to call them blaxploitation, but when they resuscitated Hollywood. But those films were coming out, and of course they were erotically or XX, you know, Pam Grier, New, you know, or half.
I think they were odd, but they were odd, because I went to see all of them. Pam Grier,
Yes.
Jim Brown,
So
R.I.P. Jim Brown.
yeah, read how you got in though. Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, you want me to read how I got into the movie
Well-
theater, or do you want me to read about TNG? I'll just read the TNG.
Yeah,
This is following.
of being clandestine. I mean, she's a sneaky little girl.
What? I don't consider myself sneaky so much as enterprising.
There we go, yeah.
That's Oakland. We know how to,
We know how to work it. This is page 182. And this is after I've talked about redevelopment and so forth, and now I go into my representation part. By 1976, some enterprising person tried to reopen the massive T&D theater on 11th Street between Broadway and Franklin. The place had been abandoned after some seedy years as a porn house and then closed again. It was now reopened in an attempt to bring the behemoth back to its former glory. The story was that in its heyday, the T&D had been absolutely gorgeous, rivaling the opulent Paramount Theater in luxury. Movie premieres were once held there. Its marquee had shone brightly. Now its heavy velvet drapes bore generations of dust. Everything had a pallor of gray. It felt a bit like a Dickens' neglected Mrs. Havisham, waiting to be rescued from a life of broken promises. My cousin Jackie, my niece Vicky visiting from Chicago, and I went to see Cooley High one afternoon. We actually saw Cooley High like 12 times. Admission was $1, and no one in the ticket booth gave two hoots about the rating system. They let everyone in. We entered this dusty chamber of horrors, walking on the sticky, elaborately patterned plush carpet through the lobby, where we saw framed photos of the theater in its prime. Though the theater owner was trying to appeal to a wider audience, the creepy jerk-offs in the trench coats, the porn fans, were still on scene. So we were very selective in choosing our seats. Every once in a while, someone on the other side of the theater would shout, "A rat!" and a cluster of folks shrieking and giggling would simply migrate to another section of the theater. Then it would happen all over again. We were fully into the movie. Who doesn't love Glenn Turman? When some dude dressed like the last pimp in California, all in white from the top of his wide-brimmed hat to his crepe-soled platform shoes, cruised slowly down the aisle. He stopped briefly to check us out, smirked his disapproval, then continued, surveying everyone as he passed, making sure that everyone saw him. "Sit down, say, down in front. Sit your ass down," people in the back of the theater bellowed. The dude paused, then moved down the aisle a bit before dramatically fanning out the tails of his long white duster. Yeah, we see you, now sit down." I wondered what idiot comes to the show in the middle of a movie. After much collar popping and brim smoothing, the guy finally took a seat. And as soon as he did, he disappeared. The entire row of seats flipped backwards, and all we saw were those white crepe-soled shoes. Sticking straight up, probably from Flag Brothers, I guess. The entire theater burst into hysterics. People pointed and laughed as the guy scrambled up from the floor, all his cool evaporated like ice on hot pavement. He walked quickly up the aisles toward the exit, all his swagger gone. The man had strutted in but crept out. As Mamela used to say, pride goeth before the fall.
Thank you, wonderful. Sarah, another strong woman in the text, comes in like an angel and becomes a surrogate parent. Can you talk about Sarah and how she helped you embrace your natural qualities?
Sarah is my older sister. She is my mother's middle child. And my mother was married before she married my dad. And she had 3 kids. Sarah was the kid who, when that marriage broke up, who was brought into the second marriage. She was maybe a toddler. She's 10 years older than me. And when I was living out here, I barely remembered her, because she left our house in St. Louis to live with her father when she got to high school. And by the time she got to high school, 9th grade, I was maybe 4, or 3 or 4. So she's that much older than me. So, but she came out here when I was 10, and we were living on Pine Street in San Francisco. And she came out, this little tiny person, as this, thunderbolt in my mind of, she came out here to go to college, I want to say, because our grandmother had told her that college in California was cheap, which it was then. I paid $2 to go to Lady College, by the way. And I only say that because there are no super, super young people in the audience that would faint if they heard that. And so Sarah came out, with her, she brought like Smokey Robinson and the Miracle album. She brought, Mal's Little Red Book. She was interested in the Panthers. She could quote from Paul Laurence Dunbar poetry. She introduced me to Langston Hughes. She was studying French, so there was a lot of, French in the, that I was learning. It's like, wait a minute, you conjugate verb? What does conjugate mean? Well, do we conjugate verbs? That kind of thing, learning about language, learning about grammar. And she just opened up my head in a way that I will be eternally grateful for, and I'm still grateful for. So she is an angel. I don't really believe in angels, but as close as an angel as I've encountered.
So can you talk more about how you and Sarah lived together? She was a teenager, and again, going to these different housing situations is tough. And I asked her, isn't this a little like Charles Dickens stories? And she said, no, but there you were, a teenager, you and Sarah together, living together.
Well, Judy and I, in preparation for this afternoon's talk, talked about this a little bit. And I don't see anything Dickensian about my life, but I kind of got where you're going, a teenager living with an older sister. What do I want to say about that? Well, here we go.
Yeah.
A teenager living with an older sister, that seems kind of like it would be cool and sexy and fun. But I had been living with Sarah for a while by the time we moved down the street. As much as I loved her and as much as she cared about me, I've been thinking about this. I was kind of begrudgingly grateful to her, the role that she was playing as surrogate mother. Our mother died. I don't think that's too horrible to that's not giving away anything. It's not like the car crash or anything. But, and so, despite all of her charity, sisterly love, and care, once our mother died, I did feel a little bit like a charity case. And what balanced that feeling was how much she gave me, continuously, unselfishly. I say in the book, I didn't want to accept any substitutes, but I had to. So eventually I had to. She was my guardian in all signed documents. But she opened up a world for me. She still opens up worlds for me.
So, you said also that Eudora Welty was an influence on you. Can you talk about that? And also, I think maybe in the context of the legacy of mothers and estrangement. I think those are some of the things that connected, but maybe not. But
You are an English teacher. Oh my goodness. I love that question. Eudora Welty comes up for me. She wrote a book called One Writer's Beginning. And she, in that book, talks about her early childhood influences that led her to become a writer. You mentioned something earlier in this conversation about is it a coming of age thing, or is it a story about a writer, a writer's beginning? And that is very clearly, that particular book, it's a really tiny book. I thought it was something else. It's both. It's both. It talks about how when you're a kid, you're so sensate and so, unless you've been completely traumatized, most kids are picking up everything. They're looking at everything. They're overhearing things. They can't, the way we were raised, you don't interrupt adults when they're talking. So you're hearing all these conversations. You're privy to all this information that maybe people aren't telling you how to process. All of that gets folded into a writer's toolkit, And as far as mothers and that whole thing I just said, I don't know how. What were you wanting me to talk about in the context of mothers?
that's fine. Can you read?
Well, here's what I can say about it. Though. My mother was a person who I watched take in a lot of what was going on around her, not joining into a lot of conversations, but hearing everything. When you're ill or a child or someone who is in a group that may be considered, not your equal, like a servant, it's those kinds of people who a lot is said in front of, but you don't think that they're processing any of it. And what my mother taught me is you don't necessarily have to be a participant in information in order to take in information.
Yeah. Is it too much to ask you to read this? Because you've already said you want to pass. This is such a beautiful passage.
Oh, wait, let me find it.
It's on page 149.
That's true.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm joking. It's the English teacher in you.
Do I have to read it? It's very poignant. I'm telling you, so many parts of this book grip at your heart. It's written from the heart, it really is. You don't need to. Can I read it?
You think I need to read it?
Well,
I'm going to do it.
Dorothy.
there we go.
Y'all, my mom died.
And that a
If
term,
it gets hard, I'll just stop reading
a
it.
term from mothers often in our Black community, I don't know, whites ever use the week, my dear. You know,
The white people call their moms Medea.
I never heard, yes,
No.
no.
There's a lot of head shaking. I'm gonna take notes.
But,
That's what I call my mom.
so this starts on page 1, you're starting on 49.
You want me to just read that page?
Well, you read whatever you want to read, sweetie.
Okay, well, you did assign this to me, teacher. Medea's funeral was held at St. Louis Bertrand's Catholic Church a few blocks away from our house. My mother's children from her first marriage, Samela and Simi, whom I hadn't seen since I was about 5 years old, came from Chicago to attend the service. They commented on how much I looked like our mother, which did not provide the salve they intended. We children sat in the front row of the church. As the only practicing Catholic in the family and the one who made all the funeral arrangements, Sarah had the service held with a full Mass. For lapsed Catholics, the ritual of Mass may leave the heart and mind, but somehow it stays in the body. And it triggered the latent muscle memories in my brothers and me who had given up on the church. We knew when to stand, kneel, sit, and cross ourselves. The priest wouldn't allow us to play Medea's favorite song, Otis Redding Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, during the service because it was secular music, and this decision ticked Albert and me off. But there was no budging the priest, and I suspected Sarah didn't press the issue. Samela chose to have Medea laid out in an orange polyester dress to match the one she herself wore. A creepy decision, I thought, and not one that Medea would have approved of. I would have put her in her favorite yellow eyelet dress with the tight bodice and flared skirt. It was sunny and made her feel dolled up, which is how she would have described it whenever she wore it. She was so pretty in it too, but I didn't get a vote. Albert and Cindy, who were our mother's favorite children, were inconsolable. No one was going to love them as unconditionally as she had. Their tears made mine flow more freely. Do you want to read the rest?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. I glanced behind me a few times to see who in the family had come and how they were expressing their grief. I had a sense that the Baptist contingent of my family was being exercised in ways they hadn't anticipated. Our Catholicism being another thing that set my mother and her children apart. After the service, as I sat in the back of the funeral car waiting for my siblings to come along, Aunt Ree and her friends approached me. These old ladies who shared seeds, plant cuttings, and wisdom with me whenever I was at Aunt Ree's place laid hands on me now and said comforting words. They told me the Lord would provide, and I really wanted to believe them. Aunt Ree asked if I'd like to come and live with her. I thought about it for a moment, surprised a little that she would ask. The generous gesture broke my heart a little, but I said no thank you. Despite all of her kindness toward me, I knew in my gut that Aunt Ree would not be able to handle a moody 13-year-old. There'd be too many rules, and I didn't want to ruin what we had going, calm, easy visits. I thought it best if I stayed with Sarah, who was younger, more tolerant, and more interested in the world beyond the house. Though I appreciated Aunt Ree's gesture, I couldn't help feeling like a charity case. I was an orphan, a new role that I had no script for. So again, over and over, these themes stay throughout, and I just love the way she handles them, and she describes her family, and so something else she doesn't really get into, and it's never mentioned in the book, the word class, but she's showing something that I think many Black writers do excellently, is showing the class divisions even within a family and within a community. So these people are all hardworking people, including your father. And her father had her when he was 68. Is that how?
According to my birth certificate.
You know, so you know, she don't own Dickinson, but you know, Charles Dickens, she doesn't own it, but there's so many elements, you know. But of course, she overcame them all.
Because I'm here with you guys today. Aunt Rod was my mother's auntie. Yeah. And it's interesting to me, thank you for reading that, but it's interesting to me to have a story be public because now, you know, my family's names are in the public, you know, and also our pronunciation of our family's names are in the public, which, you know, I was trying to figure out, it's like, why are my mother's sisters my auntie, but we call them Aunt Katie and Aunt Uni and, you know, Aunt Ruby instead of Aunt Ruby. Anyway, just something I noticed. And I loved Aunt Rod because she was a gardener, which I am a rabbit gardener, and she loved Tom Jones. But we won't get back.
So I'm looking at time.
What time is it? Ooh. Maybe we should wrap up. I think Chris is asleep back there at the sales day.
So, okay, so maybe just one more question.
Okay.
Did you need therapy to bring out this story? This was a difficult story to write.
I mean, I've had therapy in my life, but I haven't, I didn't use therapy in order to write this book. I have had many episodes with therapists early in my life, early in my adult life. But no, I didn't seek out any professional help. I didn't seek out a lot of family help, I want to say, because I wanted to be true to the form of memoir, which is to tell the story that my memory had to tell. And not turn it into a work of journalism or fiction or anything like that. I really wanted to just, you know, include in it the things that I remember, as opposed to consulting family members and having them verify things, because I knew that I wasn't going to change anything. If family said, oh, it didn't go like that, I probably wouldn't have changed anything. So
So you want to talk just briefly then about Albert, okay? Because Albert is her brother, and Dorothy and I have a lot of coincidental similarities, but my older brother is also named Albert, and my middle name is Ann. Yes. So we just, you know, we both went to school at Castlemont and so forth. But Albert, I said at the end of our pre-interview, I said, Albert gets short shrift in the book. Why?
I knew that all along, that he was given short shrift. I was trying to do two things. One, very quickly, I'll try to make this answer quick. One, I have a very troubled relationship with him. There was no way to tell my story of my childhood without him in it. But there is also, it's hard for me to kind of capture in a narrative way who Albert is, what he cared about. He's kind of a shadow figure for me that I'm still trying to work out. I'm still trying to figure out how do you approach him, not just in written form, but how do you approach him at all. He's had a very troubled life, and he has pulled himself up from the brink. He's kind of like lightning in a bottle for me. Yeah. So he is kind of underrepresented in the book, but it also says something about the division between boy and girl children, teenagers and young children. Yeah.
I think that brings us right back to, the beginning and to what did you decide to include in the book and what not to include. So you actually had said at one point that actually Albert's were the whole book, your relationship with Albert. Yes. Yeah, good.
There's a chapter in this book called Lost Black Boys. That could be a book.
There we go. So I think we have time for some Q&A with Dorothy.
Yes, Marcus?
First of all, I'm Dorothy's godson, and I'm very proud of her, and she's an intellectual, and I think this is really awesome. I'm kind of curious, you talk about it a bit. I haven't finished the book yet. I'm not like my brother, I'm a slow reader.
Mm-hmm.
But you do talk a bit about how pop culture figures and musicians and actors and authors kind of have influenced your life and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I would, if you could like maybe talk and expand about that, particularly about like Black culture and Black pop culture in your adolescence, like how it's, like how that's like influenced you, like as a human being, as a writer, etc.
Sure.
I'd be curious about that.
I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping here. Chris is selling books. If you haven't already bought a book, go to the back, and I'm gonna try to, I know this program's supposed to end at 4. Yikes, it's 3:30. I read my watch wrong. So Chris is the guy standing up, and I'll sign your books. I mean, I can stay later than 4. Well, for me, I say in the book, I think the 70s when I was a teenager was the first best time to be a Black kid in America, and I stand by that. Because finally we were coming out of this period where you didn't see us on TV, we weren't in commercials, we were just kind of invisible for a big chunk of our early youth. But by the time we were teenagers, we had, all those films coming out to kind of refinance Hollywood. We had Black people on TV. We had Black people hosting variety shows. Bill Cosby was on basically everything from Saturday morning children's events to, whatever, variety shows at night. And so we could start to see ourselves, and we could start to rewire all of that kind of invisibility and self-loathing that we had kind of grown up with, that we had kind of ingested kind of unconsciously. So it was thrilling, actually. That's the easiest way to put it in words. Is it was a thrilling time. We were present finally in the world that we occupied. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just one observation, 2 questions. You referenced your time in the San Francisco Public Library. I recently read the Bill Russell autobiography, Glory. McClymonds eventually West Oakland. That was his sanctuary. That expanded his world. For all the horrors in this society now, the library remains, the public library remains the most democratic institution in America.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's great to spend time. 2 questions about your book. How do you think Mamela and your grandmother would respond to the book? And my last question is, do you have another book forthcoming down the road?
I'm working on a book about the public library as a public institution. So yeah, I'm doing that. And there will be another one somewhere in the pipeline. And Medea and Mamela, Medea would just be proud that I wrote anything, because she was that kind of mom. Mamela probably less so. And she had a question over here. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Hi, Nina.
Yes. So I was gripped by your voice, by the intensity of the way you write. This is a craft question.
Okay.
And then Judith said something that caught my attention. She said that you, instead of proclaiming your path forward in life, you had to claim it. And I wonder, is that something that made your voice so pregnant? The fact that instead of telling it, proclaiming it, you had to claim it in actions.
It is a great question. I think so. I mean, that's all I could say. I think my not being able to speak how I was feeling, talk about how I was feeling, declare what I thought about my life or my ideas or visions or whatever. When you hold all that in, I think, you know, it kind of works in a way kind of like rock, where you get stronger and stronger and stronger and clearer. The harder the compression is. At least maybe it's because I just read that book on Oakland geology. I have rock analogies now. And so, and I think that has something to do with the fact that I was pretty voiceless during most of my childhood. And so I had been, all these ideas and feelings and impressions were cooking. You like that answer, Judy? Okay.
Oh, yeah, because that connects to Mamela.
Yeah.
You know, and you said Mamela wouldn't particularly be pleased by this.
Not at all.
You know,
But
because
that's okay.
Mamela wants you to toe the line.
Toe the line, that's what I was
What
gonna
you
say.
had to do.
Yes.
What you're supposed to do. Not what
Yeah.
you want to do.
Thank you so much for all your humor and for giving the space for the humor, even though those are your natural inclinations. And one scene I love is when you're slicing meat.
Oh, in my auntie's store?
Yes.
Yeah, and Katie
then
owned a
it's
store on
too
17th and
thick.
Campbell.
Yeah, and giving it away.
Well, you can't have a good fried bologna sandwich with thin bologna. It just doesn't work, right?
Yeah. So I just think the humor, like the corn, the Kevin Corn.
Kevin Corner.
Yes, and just the way you balance both the tenderness and the humor, and this being a memoir, you just nailed it. So it's so fun to read, and all the popular culture with the Merv Griffin and the Mike Douglas. It's its own archaeology and ethnography.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Jan. Who hasn't bought a book yet?
Do it.
Chris is back there. Judy's gonna wrap it up for us, I guess.
No, it's wrapped.
Oh, did I just wrap it? Okay.